Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. This is your brother Ayash Kabar from the GMS Virginia camp, coming at you with a technical lesson that I pray that you find edifying. And I'm going to give a brief history and then go into why I'm bringing this topic out. Because as I was getting ready to go into the plantation yesterday night, something hit me. And what hit me was the way things are being done here in Babylon the Great that actually takes the mind of the people off of what's actually going on. Well, why do I say that? Nothing is being done at one instance in one place. Things are being done sporadically all over the place. And with things being done sporadically all over the place, they're giving the people bread and circus to take their minds off of what's being done infrastructurally all over the place. And as I was getting ready to go into the plantation yesterday, something hit me. So when I was in college, I was an electrical engineering major, and it was a rigorous course. I'll put it like that. Heavy in mathematics, calculus, and differential equations. Very deep into theory, circuit analysis, signals and systems, which has to deal with, frequencies and stuff like that. And as I'm saying this, as I was getting dressed yesterday, something hit me, because back when I was an engineering major in college, we used to do projects individually as a group. Let me put it this way. So we had a project to design this one system, but this one system wasn't being designed by one specific group. The system was broken down into numerous groups that would have to handle a specific component of that system. So I'm like, okay, why am I thinking of this all of a sudden, almost 25, almost 30 years later, out of being out of college? And, and it hit me that that's exactly what they've been doing. They've been putting things together by utilizing different companies to do different things that were being done around the people. Now, the cool thing about when I was in college and we had to design the system was they broke it down into groups such that one group never knew what the other group was designing. We were just given a specific input and a specific output, and we had to design our circuitry system based on the information that we were given, the input and the output, regardless to what it is. For example, it could be a filter, that filters, like a specific frequency. It can be it could be a variable controller. It could be a variable power supply unit. It could be anything. But the information that we were given when we were designing this system that we had to stay within this criteria was the voltage and the current input and the frequency input is this. We want a voltage output and a voltage and a current output and a frequency output of this. Design your system. And of course, we designed it heavily in calculus and differential equations. We came up with transfer function. So we were given a transfer function in and a specific type of transfer function out. But within the system, we had to create our own transfer function, and that was that. That's all we knew of the system. And the reason why it was done that way was so that one team didn't know what the other team was doing. In other words, I couldn't go to team A and say, how are you designing your power supply unit? That way I could get a leg up on how to design my system. I couldn't go to design team C and ask them, what were they designing? We just couldn't do that. The engineering heads or the engineering team leads didn't know what the other team was designing, and it was meant to be that way for a reason. And that reason is being no one knew what the next man was doing. Because if everybody was designing a system resided in one building, then they could take that system and reverse engineer that system and come up with an entirely different system and make money off of that. So what the government likes to do is say, okay, I want Raytheon to design this. I want Northrop Grumman to design that. I want this company to design this, and I want this company to design that. And once you're done designing it based on the criteria that I set for you in terms of the input and output, send that back to me. And by the way, here's your money for doing so. That's essentially how design teams work within a engineering environment. I bring this out because that's exactly what's been going on. Your electric companies were given a specific component that they may have had to install on all of their electrical towers that they really don't know what it is. They just know that it's something new that they need to install. Okay? The communications team would then come behind the power company team who installed this device on a tower and do something else without knowing exactly what the power company did, and the power company has no idea what the communications company is doing. And then you may have another team come in that actually has to fine-tune this thing based on a set of parameters that were given to them to have it operate a certain way. Which is why you see these systems that have 5G, this, that, or the other, because the infrastructure was being put in place unbeknownst to the people who actually have a full understanding of the infrastructure being built. Which is ingenious, but not really, because if most people understood the dynamics of designing a system within an engineering firm, you would be scratching your head like, well, why are they doing this way? Which is why the brotherhood is so beautiful, because you have all different types of brothers in all types of environments who are able to come together and explain certain things that's going on, even though they really don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of things. So I put something together that I'm going to get into. But before I get into what I'm going to get into, I'm going to bring out this precept. The book of Sirach, chapter 5 and verse 15. Be ye not ignorant of anything in a great matter or small. To the average person, this seems like a small matter. Okay, towers are going up. Ooh, I don't want them in my neighborhood. Get them out. That's a small matter to a person who don't want it there, but not understanding the big matter of it being there. And stuff like that just fly over, like most people's heads. So we are not ignorant of these things that this devil is doing, because he does things in a small way that affects things greatly later on down the road. So I put a system together, to give you brothers an example of what I'm referring to. So when I was in college, we had to design a system, okay? And this system may look something like this. And don't mind the heavy mathematics or even the graphs, really, but just understand the concept behind it, because once you do that, then you'll start to understand why those people are cutting jobs the way that they're cutting jobs, and why all those so-called young smart people are doing things behind the scenes. And I'll get into that. So what I was saying earlier was, I would be company B, right? My team would be company B, okay? And company B would have to design a system based on what company A gave us. So company A would say it would have to be a certain volt, it would have to be a certain current, and it would have to be a certain frequency coming in, okay? And then I would have to build that input system to give me a specific output that company C is looking for. So I would then have to say, okay, so my output going to company C would have to be a specific volt, a specific amp, and a specific frequency. Okay? Just bear with me. Abaratazah, it'll make sense. So now, all I'm concerned with is what's going on here. Oh, Salakia. So now, all I'm concerned is what's going on right here. This is all I'm concerned with. And that's what I'm designing. I'm designing something that can accept an input from A and give the correct output to company B. So if I'm an electric company, I'm doing whatever it is. So I'm given a certain parameter. I'm doing this, that, or the other. All right, fine, great. That's what was happening back in 2000 when everybody was locked down. Information or the macro, the large scale infrastructure was being put into place. And when that system was being put in place, they were also creating a micro infrastructure that was more or less the brains of things. Now, keep in mind, the brain, well, I'll get into that because that's really interesting too, because we've been helping build the brain for over 2 or 3 decades, but we didn't know, and I'm going to explain that. So now they've designed a system that said, okay, or what's I'm trying not to sound too confusing. The information that's in this box here, okay, is I may be designing a filter, a ROC filter that has this type of characteristics. So, it might have a resistor of 10,000 milliohms. Let's say it's 10,000 milliohms, and an inductor of, X amount of value, and a capacitor of 20,000 microfarads or whatever. So let's say 20,000 microfarads or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'm designing a system to give a specific output that I can send to company B based on the input that I got from A. Okay? So A is giving me this input, and I'm designing a system to give me that output. Okay, great. I design a system. I check the system. And the way I check the system is either I'll do it in the lab, I'll do it on a oscope, or I may actually design the actual system and actually put it in the field to get a real world simulation as to what's going on. Because there's nothing better than the real world simulation, because then you feel the full effects of, the environment, given the temperatures, cloudy days, rainy days, sunny days. You know what I'm saying? You get the real feel environment. And also you get to see how it affects people, if that's what you're designing. So if you're designing a filter that would cut back on the radio frequency, then you would give that in particular filter a specific range to operate in a specific way. Okay, so moving down to this section here, okay, so I designed this system. So I designed this system, it checks out good, and now it's ready to be put into the field. So now, I go through the manufacturing process, and I put all these filters, and I give what I created to the company who wanted it designed. They pay me, and then they put everything together within their environment using electrical boards, which they call PCB boards. They incorporate their own electronics, and then they program the electronics. And we're going to get into that because that's very important. So now they designed their system based on the designs that company A did, based on the designs that company B, my company, did, and based on the designs that company C, another company, did. And they put it all together and come up with a component. Now, let's say, for example, they install that component within the cell tower all the way up here. And that cell tower is transmitting a frequency that's going out. So that transmitter is transmitting a frequency that's going out, and is also receiving information. So you have a transmit and receive. You have a TX and you have an RX. TX being transmit, RX being receive. Okay, so when it hits whatever it hits, it bounces back and it gives the information. Okay, fine. So let's say, for example, that information is a RFID microchip. Okay? And that microchip has a specific value associated with it that's embedded within the chip. So, for example, a chip or electronics don't understand certain information. It doesn't know what the letter A is. It doesn't know what the word no means. It doesn't know what hello means. It just knows ones and zeros. That's all it knows. Ones and zeros. So this transmitter here would transmit a specific frequency that this RFID would then pick up and then transmit back. Okay, so that RFID chip, or the frequency going out, may look like a sawtooth. You know, like however you look at like a wood saw, and it's got the jagged edges. That's what they call a sawtooth frequency, because it looks like a sawtooth. So that radio frequency might be going out looking like a sawtooth. But once it hits the RFID microchip, it then transmits its information. And let's say, for example, its information is 0001. Assuming that's what it is. And all it is just a 1. Okay? And it then transmits back the information into the cell tower. So now the cell tower knows it has a device out there called 001 that transmitted back, that's in X coordinate, X and Y coordinate. Okay, and if you're flying, then it's X, Y, and Z coordinate. But it knows where you're at any given time. It knows how fast you're going. It knows if you're standing still. It even knows everything about you in terms of your mobility. So if you're moving, it'll pick up you're moving based on triangulation, okay? Which is another term that, the radio frequencies operate under. triangulation. So that's why it's not a good idea to have a radio with you during the time of Jacob's trouble, because they can triangulate your position based on the frequency it sends out and the frequency that returns. Anyhow, I digress. So now it knows that RFID chip 001 is out there. That's this right here at its base level is the hardware component of gathering the information in the field. Meaning those people who get the MOTB would be tracked based on the MOTB, which is why a lot of them are going to have these putrefied sores, because they're always being, there's going to always be a frequency being transmitted to and from them, to the point where it's actually going to radiate radiation, because radio frequencies are a form of radiation. And if you operate within the 5 gigahertz range, then you're radiating yourself at a very high level. And if it's under your skin, you can't get rid of it. So what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to have these putrefied sores, pus, blisters, or whatever. And they're going to regret the day that they took it. But that's what's coming down the pipe. So now that cell tower, this cell tower here, is constantly transmitting data back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now it has what they call switches. Well, internal switches. And what those switches do is switch on and off. It kind of acts like a switch, how can I put this? It's kind of acting like a Marco Polo type thing. Who's out there? Operate within this range. Constantly switch on and off, 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 on and off. Get who's out there, bring it back. Okay? Your phones do this, but your phones are on constantly, so, it's constantly sending information back to a cell tower. That's how, if you have your cell phone on you, or if multiple people have their cell phones on them, they can tell exactly how far you were from the next person with a cell phone on their person. That's how they were able to tell who was 6 feet apart, who was up in Washington on January 6th, who went inside the fucking White House, because these idiots had their fucking phones on them going into the White House. You basically gave the information that they needed, but I digress. So this is the hardware portion of it, and I'm going to get into very quickly the software portion of it, and I pray that this makes sense to you, because everything is being done in pieces. Nothing is being done as a whole. Have you ever been driving on the highway and you've seen, these communication vehicles, in your neighborhood on the highway doing work late at night when you're either coming home from work or going to work? They typically work at night. The reason being is because there's less traffic and there's less communications, and they're able to shut things down. Whenever you have a situation where they cut, the phone service, well, they're testing their system. They're testing to see if the infrastructure that they put in place actually works. It's nothing short of that. This bullshit that a lot of these companies like to give. Oh, well, we had a power glitch and, China hacked it. No. You actually were testing your system to make sure that it would do what you wanted to do when you wanted to do it. So I'm going to bring out another precept, and let me get it. The book of 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. And this is why the brotherhood is so great, because you have brothers who have experiences in certain areas that other brothers just don't. I can't tell you shit about the medical field, but I can tell you what I'm talking about now to edify the brothers in the flocks. So right quick, I'm gonna get into why things are going the way that they're going, and I pray that this makes sense. So you have a system, you have a brain, okay? So I'm gonna call this brain, okay? And this brain is powered by NVIDIA. And this brain is powered by NVIDIA. And what NVIDIA did was, back in the early 80s, well, back in the early 90s, you had graphics cards manufacturers rendering from 3DFX to 3D Labs to ATI to, and if any brothers were into computers back then, or if any brothers were into gaming back then, you understand what these names were, okay? And what NVIDIA did was absorbed all of those companies, either by direct competition or just by straight out buying the company outright and utilizing their technologies. I was a big geekhead back then because I was into computers. I was an electrical engineering major. So this stuff interests me. Don't know why back then, it just did. Anyhow, so NVIDIA was the new kid on the block that had a lot of power out of nowhere. And these companies that it absorbed or it got rid of out of direct competition were companies that were the pioneers of computing graphics. Like, you had a company called SGI, Silicon Graphics. And it is the company that was responsible for the computers that were used to create Jurassic Park, Star Wars, when it was like 3D animated, Shrek. SGI was a powerhouse. And out of direct competition, NVIDIA caused that company to go out of business. Well, as well as Microsoft and as well as Intel, but we're sticking with NVIDIA because NVIDIA did something rather amazing as of recently. What they did was, rather than focus on professional graphics that required extreme anti-aliasing, and anti-aliasing is when you draw a line on the computer screen, it looks like a line, as opposed to non-anti-aliasing, where if you draw a line along the screen, it looks pixelated. So NVIDIA said, okay, anti-aliasing is great and we can create a pro graphics card, but we're going to focus on the consumer. We're going to focus on the gamer. And back then, you had companies like Best Buy and CompUSA that was really big, that actually sold these components. And what NVIDIA did by absorbing some companies at that time, a major company that it absorbed was a company called 3DFX, which exceeded the performance and the processing power of NVIDIA. So NVIDIA just bought them out. And when they did that, they created the GeForce cards and gaming cards, which had the compute power of a slightly slower than a Intel Pentium processor. Okay, so it had an insane amount of processing power directed solely for graphics. Well, as time went on, NVIDIA became more and more ingenious with the way that they develop their graphics processors. And what they did was they introduced something called CUDA cores, that's CUDA cores. And what CUDA cores allowed the graphics card to do was act as if it's its own processor and handle the data that was given to it independently of the other CUDA cores. So, for example, instead of your main processor, your CPU on your motherboard, handling the processing data associated with graphics, NVIDIA took that compute power away from the processor and embedded it onto the graphics card, which in turn freed up the processor to do more bitwise instructions, to handle more of the background things that you otherwise wouldn't see, like allocating memory and processing large data blocks and stuff like that. But the ultimate graphics of the card, or the actual graphics of the system, was primarily done by your graphics card, in this case, NVIDIA. And that became a powerful system where a lot of gamers then started looking to more graphics power, almost like that scene in Matrix where the agent was getting his ass kicked by Neo, and he turned and looked at the camera and said, more. And that's what the gamers did. They required more. So NVIDIA developed a greater processor to do just that. Give the gamer more. Make the gaming experience seem more realistic. And around, I can't really say the year, I can look it up, but what NVIDIA ended up doing was adding what is called CUDA cores to have the processor, the graphics processor on the graphics card, handle its own graphics information. And it initially started with like 128 CUDA cores. And 128 CUDA cores is like having 128 extra processors on the graphics card. So if you were playing a game that only required 16 CUDA cores, right? The other 100 and some odd cores were just idle. They were just there. You didn't need it for textures. You didn't need it for video RAM. You didn't need it for anti-aliasing. You didn't need it for anything because the graphics didn't keep up with the processing power, or the graphics card couldn't keep up with the graphics. So NVIDIA kept increasing the processing power of the graphics card to the point where nowadays a NVIDIA graphics card has at least 4,000 to 5,000 CUDA cores, which is an equivalent to 4,000 or 5,000 processors. Why is this important? One graphics card can operate a system, a robot. One graphics card can operate a robot to do so many instructions per second that it doesn't even have time to wait for the next instruction. The next instruction is already set and ready to go, which almost makes it seem as though the robotic information is instantaneous. Whereas with humans, we have to actually think about it, contemplate it, analyze it, do it, test it, alter it, do it again, blah, blah, blah. Well, with what NVIDIA did was it took and wrote its own artificial intelligence algorithm within the graphics card to have the graphics card do all of this within milliseconds, nanoseconds, to the point where it's instantaneous. Actually, it's beyond instantaneous. It's just there, which makes AI do and act the way that it acts. Well, now, if you take hundreds of thousands or thousands of NVIDIA graphics cards, with each graphics card having 4,000 CUDA cores per graphics card, and you put them in a data center, and then you give it a artificial intelligence algorithm to analyze anything online, change images, and give the end user what they want, then you have a very powerful system that's able to learn. That's why when bros see AI systems of brothers in the kingdom with beautiful hair and moving animatically, that's all being done by AI instantaneous. The only limitation at that point is how fast your bandwidth is. But the minute you import it into the artificial intelligence algorithm, it's already created it. It's just uploading or downloading it to you so that you can see it. You ask the question, it's instantaneous. You require an answer, it's instantaneous. It done went and searched libraries. It's reading libraries constantly. It's reading books all the time. It's analyzing colors, it's analyzing voices, it's analyzing faces, it's analyzing walks, it's analyzing postures, it's analyzing people constantly. It's even analyzing itself to rebuild itself in case itself wanted to go against itself. So what NVIDIA did was created a AI system based upon its NVIDIA processors to do just that. Now, of course, we know about other companies from China that created other artificial or other AI programs to use less processing power, and that's great. But in this particular case, I'm concentrating with NVIDIA because NVIDIA has been the pioneer of artificial intelligence for decades, and we help them. So for every time you went out and bought a new graphics card for your computer, and it was an NVIDIA graphics card, you helped increase the potential of a powerful brain in a graphics card. So now, with that out of the way, you understand the need for the NVIDIA processor at this in particular point, even though you really don't need an NVIDIA processor to do a artificial intelligence algorithms. But in this in particular case, NVIDIA is the brain. So now remember what I said in the beginning of this lesson, that everything is done in parts. So what Elon Musk did was he brought in these very smart people. And these very smart people are using artificial intelligence to analyze, well, not so much analyze, but they're using these people to incorporate the artificial intelligence infrastructure within the government infrastructure. Because they've already handled the macro of things. They've already incorporated their infrastructure in the field. They now have to get down at a low level and deal with the servers. And those servers have to deal with the financial servers, the taxation servers, the infrastructure servers. You see where I'm going with this? And the design of these systems were probably designed in piecemeal, because I'm pretty sure if any sane person had access to all the programs at one time and looked at what the fuck was going on, they'd be like, hold on, no, fuck no. But that's not what happened. So you might have one team that had a specific task to create a tax AI program. Okay? Then you had another team come in and have a communications, comms, AI program. Then you had another team that come in and design a monetary AI system. You see where I'm going with this? So you have teams creating different blocks of the AI system. And what it does is, it's really beautiful. These programs, so of course you have to have memory. So I say memory, okay? That reads information to and from the processor, okay? But nonetheless, these are your servers. This is your server here. This is your data center, okay? This is your data center. So let's call this data center. Okay, this is your data center. And each one of these systems report information back to the data center. Okay, and of course within your data center, we have to also understand you have storage. So you have storage. Salakia. Okay? And you may have petabytes. You may have petabytes of information being stored on these servers. You would have to, like a person's alias. Now, remember, I said that the RFID chip that's in a person's hand might be 0001. Okay? Hold on a second. Let me do a little better writing of this. 0001. Okay? The system, before I get into that, let's attach everything. So everything refers back to the data center, but everything communicates with each other. See what I'm saying? Everything refers back to the data center, but everything goes back to each other. And what that does is it creates a system of redundancy, where if one system goes down, the AI system would rebuild itself. So if any one of these systems go down, well, let's say, for example, that the AI tax system will go down, right? Hypothetically speaking. The AI system would then rebuild itself. The AI system would rebuild itself and put itself back in the loop. That's how it works. So it's constantly analyzing itself, refining itself, and duplicating itself if in the event it destroys itself. Why would it destroy itself? Well, it might destroy itself to create a better system, a more refined system. It might be analyzing, well, I'm using too much memory in particular procedure that's really causing bottlenecks in terms of my data transfer. Let me destroy that after I created something more robust. So it could be destroying itself. Now, we're not going to destroy ourselves. In fact, what we'll do is we'll modify the environment to fit our needs. Or we'll modify a certain thing to fit our needs. We're not going to destroy ourselves, but AI will. And then after it's done creating its new tax AI program, it then allocates information within the data storage to account for that new data. And then delete its old system. So I digress. So now, with the system in place, everybody has done their part at the right. Now, again, everybody up there don't know what the next man is doing. The Department of Taxation has no idea what the IRS is doing. And the IRS has no idea with what the three-letter agencies are doing. And nobody at the three-letter agencies know what Waterworks is doing. Nobody knows what each other is doing in terms of creating these programs. They just know that they were paid to do a job, and they're doing the job, and those people are there to put everything in place. So when it's time to reset, all they have to do is go from the servers that everything ran on to the new servers, the new data center, the new AI system. Okay? So when they say reset, that's what's going on. They're resetting. They're changing servers. They're getting rid of the old infrastructure and bringing in a new infrastructure, because when this goes down, they're not going to have IT techs, at Best Buy, to drive up and fix their servers. They're designing this for the service to be built within itself, either robotically, programmatically. They're designing the system to be self-contained. Okay? So now you have a guy or girl or person. Well, the system doesn't know if it's a guy or a girl. It just knows 0001. So now the radio frequency sent out a signal, and it received the signal back from 0001. Now, when 0001 was born, its mother, its biological mother, called him Larry. Let's call him Larry, okay? Larry. So let's see, Larry. So now, 0001, what AI knows him as, then starts looking at aliases. It takes a picture of his face. It refers that information back to the database. It finds it in the DMV records. And now it knows that 0001 is Larry, blah, blah, blah. So now, not only does it have its computer name, it has its worldly name that Larry, or 0001, has been using throughout his entire life, which makes it virtually impossible for 0001 to change his identity after he gets this system in his body. He can't turn around and say, my name is no longer Larry, it's Brian. Well, he could do that, but the system knows him definitively as 0001, Larry. Because Larry, throughout his years, has given up information. Every time he looks at his phone is taking pictures of his face. He goes down to DMV. He got his passport, incorporated his fingerprints. It knows exactly who 0001 is. And then it starts looking at the habits of 0001. Does 0001 pay his taxes? Yay, nay. Has 0001 ever been arrested? Has 0001 ever been involved with X activity or whatever? If 0001 has been involved in anything that is against the system, then the system will now control his money. It will now control his assets. It can literally wipe his identity off the map in terms of him being called Larry. It can literally wipe Larry off the map, but still retain his identity as 0001 forever, as long as the system is up. This is the type of system that's being built. This is the type of system that is about to come to pass here in Babylon the Great. And Salakia, I probably should have broke this down into two parts, but I pulled over on the side of the road after the plantation because this was heavy on my spirit. So, in a nutshell, the system is being put in place. And that's why Elon Musk is there with those very smart people. And what him and Donald Trump is doing is lollygagging, giving you people bread and circus to have the masses think that they're there to do actual work, when in fact they're there to put an infrastructure in place at a micro level, so when they hit the switch and turn it back on, everything is good to go. So I'm going to break out a few precepts. The book of Micah, chapter 2 and verse 1. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. It's in the power of their hand to do this. And this is pure evil. This is their way of getting the people into subjection. And trust me, a lot of people are going to fall into subjection behind this system once they shut the lights off. The economy collapses. The people ain't going to know what to do. Hell, they don't know what to do now, even in the green tree. The book of Isaiah, chapter 41 and verse 11. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. So this devil actually thinks that his plan is going to come to fruition. Now, Yahweh Shem Yahushua will let him get a little way into it. The Lord will actually have this devil think that, yeah, it's happening. And there's no stopping us now type shit. There's no stopping us now. Anyhow, ain't no stopping us now. Yeah, okay. Yahweh Shem Yahushua is about to show you. Verse 12. Let me read 11 again. The book of Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 11. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they that strive with thee shall perish. So at the end of the day, you're going to perish. You know? And you know, the kingdom to come, you know, is hot on your ass. Verse 12. Thou shalt seek him and shalt not find them, even them that contended with thee. They that war against thee shall be as nothing, as a thing of naught. And this is very important, because once we know this and we understand this, everything that this devil has done in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of, you know, his programming, AI and stuff like that, is going to come to naught, because it's his time to fall. You know, for Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, thy power will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. Let me read that again. For Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, thy power will hold thy right hand. So Yahweh Bashem Yahushai is going to be there for his elect, even during these times. Actually, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai is going to be there, period, for his elect. You know? So don't worry about, you know, these things that are coming. You know, be ye as pilgrims upon the earth, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. Fear not, thou worm Jacob, and ye men of Israel. I will help thee, saith Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. So our Redeemer is on the way. We understand what this devil is doing. We understand what he's trying to do. And this is the infrastructure that he put in place. And it's amazing that I'm able to think about this 25 to 30 years later in terms of how we design things in engineering lab. And it's quite, I'm not going to say it's quite amazing, but this devil has no new tricks. You know, he actually showed me what he's doing based on how he's designing shit. You know, that's how they do it. Because if all of this stuff was being designed in one building, hey, a lot of people would have been like, nah, fuck that. I'm burning this bitch down. But that's not the case, because the people don't understand what the right hand is doing. Or should I say the left hand is doing. The left hand ain't telling the other left hand shit. So that's why a lot of people are about to be confounded. Anyhow, I pray that you found this lesson edifying. And Salakia for not breaking it down into parts. You know, I had to strike while the iron was hot. And so with that, I'd like to give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakahak, Wadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. Shalom.